For decades, Goldie Hawn was Hollywood's sunshine, the golden-haired star, whose laughter could brighten even the darkest day. Her career was built on joy, love, and light, captivating millions of fans around the world. Yet behind the glamorous smile lay a different story, one marked by pain, humiliation, and an endless fight for respect. Now at 79, Goldie is no longer afraid to tell the truth. She removes the mask of eternal optimism and reveals the scars she carried silently for years. Scars left by 6 powerful men whose arrogance, ego, and cruelty turned her Hollywood dream into moments of quiet heartbreak. This is not only her personal confession, but also a reminder of how women in the film industry were too often diminished, tested, and wounded by those who feared their brilliance. Goldie Hawn's story is no longer just about laughter. It is about resilience, dignity, and the extraordinary courage to walk away when respect is gone. Goldie Hawn never set out to be Hollywood's eternal optimist. Yet that is exactly what she became. With her wide, sparkling eyes, effervescent laughter, and natural warmth, she captured the world's imagination in a way few actresses ever had. From her breakthrough on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In in the late 1960s, Goldie was quickly branded as America's Golden Girl, a dazzling, carefree spirit who seemed untouched by the shadows of fame. But what audiences saw was only part of the truth. Behind the iconic giggle was a fiercely ambitious and intelligent woman who refused to be boxed in by Hollywood stereotypes. Producers and critics tried to pin her down as the ditzy blonde, the sidekick, or the pretty ornament on screen. Yet Goldie was determined to prove she was. She studied her craft, fought for better roles, and carved out a reputation as a performer with both comedic brilliance and emotional depth. Her persistence paid off. In 1969, she won the Academy Award for Cactus Flower, silencing skeptics who doubted her ability. For many actresses, that might have been the peak. For Goldie, it was only the beginning. She went on to dominate the 1970s and 1980s, not only as a box office draw but as a pioneer, one of the rare women in Hollywood who fought her way into producing her own film. Through Private Benjamin, she proved she could lead a film to massive commercial and critical success, while shaping the creative vision behind it. Yet success carried its own price. In the male-dominated world of Hollywood, her intelligence and ambition were often treated not with respect, but with resistance. Many of her male co-stars and collaborators didn't see her as an equal. They saw her as competition, and in an industry fueled by ego, competition could quickly turn to cruelty. Goldie's story is not just one of triumphs, but of battles fought quietly, with dignity. Her laughter made the world believe in joy, but her silence hid the pain of betrayal, condescension, and dismissal at the hands of men who underestimated her. To understand the scars she carries, one must first understand the light she brought, and how that very light threatened those who stood beside her. By 1980, Goldie Hawn was unstoppable. Her film Private Benjamin had become a cultural sensation, not just because it was funny and heartfelt, but because it proved something few in Hollywood believed possible. A woman could star in, produce, and carry a box office hit entirely on her own. Goldie was no longer simply the effervescent blonde. She was a powerhouse shaping her own destiny. At the same time, Chevy Chase was riding high on the fame he had earned from Saturday Night Live. Known for his biting sarcasm and sharp wit, he carried himself like a man who believed comedy belonged to him alone. When Columbia Pictures paired him with Goldie in Seems Like Old Times, audiences expected magic. On paper, it was a perfect match. In reality, it was anything but. From the very first days on set, the atmosphere soured. Goldie, ever the professional, arrived prepared. Her lines memorized, her character fully formed, her timing precise. She treated comedy as a craft, as disciplined and deliberate as any dramatic role. Chase, by contrast, wielded improvisation not as a creative tool, but as a weapon. He skipped lines, raced through punchlines, and inserted unscripted gags to throw her off rhythm. It didn't feel like collaboration. It felt like sabotage. Crew members later admitted it was as if he wanted to prove she couldn't keep up, as though her Oscar win was nothing more than luck. The breaking point came during one of the film's most important scenes, a monologue Goldie had rehearsed for weeks. It was her chance to show depth, to move beyond comedy into something raw and human. But just before she began, Chevy leaned toward a crew member and whispered loud enough for her to hear, "Let's see if the Laugh-In girl can actually act." The words cut like glass. Goldie, ever composed, didn't falter. She delivered the monologue flawlessly, silencing the set with the sheer force of her performance. But something in her shifted. She kept her smile, but those close to her said it never reached her eyes again. From that day forward, she did her job with grace, but she kept her distance. When the film wrapped, she drew a clear line. She told her agent she would never work with Chevy Chase again, and she never did. Years later, when Chase's reputation for arrogance resurfaced during his turbulent time on Community, Goldie's private response was simple: some people never change. For Goldie, Chevy Chase was not just a difficult co-star. He was a painful reminder of the darker side of comedy, the cruelty that hides behind jokes, the egos that eclipse artistry, and the way women's brilliance was so often dismissed as trivial. In the 1970s, few men in Hollywood commanded more attention than Warren Beatty. He was the ultimate leading man, handsome, charismatic, and endlessly powerful both on and off the screen. For many, crossing paths with him meant not only romance but also opportunity. When Goldie Hawn entered his orbit, it seemed like a pairing out of a glossy magazine. Two glamorous stars, both at the top of their careers, wrapped in the promise of something more than just a fling. At first, the relationship felt thrilling. Beatty's charm was magnetic, and Goldie, always open-hearted, allowed herself to believe in both the man and the possibilities. He spoke of a project he was developing, a sophisticated comedy that seemed tailor-made for her, a chance to show off not only her humor, but also her vulnerability. Scripts were discussed, meetings were held, and for a brief moment it seemed as though their connection might merge seamlessly into her professional life. Then, without warning, everything changed. Goldie didn't hear it from Beatty himself, but from the Hollywood trade papers. The role she had been promised was being rewritten for another actress. Worse still, Beatty was quoted as saying the part required more depth than his original choice could bring. The implication was unmistakable. To the world, it looked as though he had decided Goldie wasn't enough, neither as an actress nor as a woman. The betrayal hit her deeply. Friends recall how she described it. He had used the intimacy of their relationship to build trust, only to twist it into humiliation. In the small, gossipy circles of Hollywood, the story spread quickly. Suddenly, the whispers painted Goldie as lightweight, a comedienne unfit for serious work. The damage was done, not only to her heart, but to her reputation. But Goldie, as always, responded with resilience. Instead of retreating, she pushed forward. She founded her own production company, created projects that highlighted her range, and proved again and again that she could lead films that balanced humor with heart. The scars, however, never fully healed. Decades later, when asked about Beatty in an interview, Goldie didn't lash out. Instead, she offered a serene smile and said, "Some chapters are better left closed." Those who knew her well understood the weight behind the word. What had begun as charm had ended as betrayal. And though Goldie had moved on, the memory remained a quiet reminder of the cost of trusting too easily in Hollywood's golden men. By the early 1990s, Goldie Hawn was more than a star. She was a force. She had conquered the box office, won an Oscar, and proven her business acumen by running her own production company, Hawn Sealbert Productions. Unlike many of her peers, she wasn't content to simply accept roles. She wanted to shape stories, especially ones that gave women more depth and power. It was during this period that her path crossed with Bruce Willis. Willis was at the height of his fame, propelled by the Die Hard franchise into Hollywood's inner circle of leading men. When he became attached to Goldie's latest project, a dramedy series for ABC called Partners, it looked like a win for both of them. Goldie brought vision and credibility. Willis added star power. Together, they could have created something groundbreaking, but almost immediately their visions clashed. Goldie had conceived Partners as a sophisticated, character-driven show about relationships. She wanted nuance, humor, and authenticity. Television that could feel both entertaining and honest. Willis, however, saw it differently. Under his influence, the scripts began to lean towards spectacle. Where Goldie envisioned layered conversations, Willis pushed for action beats. Where she wanted wit, he demanded one-liners. Slowly, the project she had nurtured began slipping out of her hands. The breaking point came during a production meeting. Goldie raised concerns about the direction the show was taking, offering thoughtful critiques and solutions. In front of the entire team, Willis cut her off with a dismissive smile and said, "Trust me, honey, I know what works." That single word, honey, was enough. For Goldie, it wasn't just condescension. It was a lifetime of being diminished by men who refused to see her as an equal. No matter how much she had achieved, she didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply closed her folder, stood up, and said calmly, "I think we have different visions for this project. Within days, her company had withdrawn entirely, sacrificing money and credit, rather than compromise her principles. The show went ahead under Willis's leadership. Without Goldie's steady hand, it quickly unraveled and was canceled after a single season. Insiders whispered that its failure was proof that she had been right all along. For Goldie, though, it was never about vindication. It was about respect. Years later, when asked about difficult creative partnerships, she offered a pointed reflection without naming names. True collaboration requires respect. Without that, you're just serving someone else's ego. By the mid-1980s, Goldie Hawn had become more than Hollywood's golden girl. She was also a mother, carefully balancing her family life with her career. Though she was selective about her public appearances, she agreed to attend a Saturday Night Live after-party as a favor to producer Lorne Michaels, an old friend. For Goldie, it was supposed to be a light-hearted evening, a rare chance to mingle away from the cameras. But the night took a cruel turn. Bill Murray, already notorious for his unpredictability, arrived inebriated and loud. Instead of charm, he brought sharp edges. Surrounded by cast members and guests, he made a joke at Goldie's expense, pointing at her body and quipping that she still looked pregnant. The remark hung in the air like a slap. For a woman who had spent years pushing back against Hollywood's relentless fixation on female appearance, the insult cut deeply. Goldie had given birth, she had built a family, and she had managed to continue thriving in one of the most unforgiving industries in the world. Yet in that moment, all Murray chose to see was an opportunity to reduce her to a punchline about her body. Goldie handled the moment with grace. She smiled politely, excused herself, and left the party. But those who knew her best said she was shaken. Later she confided, "It's one thing to joke about someone's work. It's another to mock a woman's body after she's given life." The wound never fully closed. Years later, when a producer floated the idea of pairing them in a film, Murray reportedly dismissed the suggestion with another jab. "I don't do movies with grandmothers." By then, Goldie had embraced her role as a grandmother to Kate Hudson's son. But the comments it was confirmation that Murray's cruelty was not a passing lapse of judgment, but part of his nature. Goldie never publicly attacked him, never lowered herself to a war of words. Instead, she distanced herself completely. Despite multiple opportunities, she never worked with him again. A producer who knew them both summed it up best. Goldie doesn't hold grudges over mistakes, but she never forgets cruelty, especially when it's never acknowledged. For Goldie, Bill Murray wasn't just an unkind colleague, he was proof of a harsher truth. Even at the peak of success, even after proving herself time and again, Hollywood's women could still be reduced to their bodies with a single thoughtless remark. By the early 2000s, Goldie Hawn's life had entered a new chapter. Though still admired as an actress, her focus had shifted toward a cause she considered even more important: children's mental health. Through the Hawn Foundation, she dedicated herself to research-based programs that supported emotional well-being and education. To her, this was not a side project or a vanity pursuit. It was her second calling. She spent years consulting with psychologists, meeting with policymakers, and ensuring that her work was grounded in science as well as compassion. But Hollywood has never been kind to women who try to step outside the roles it assigns them. And when Sean Penn gave an interview in the early 2000s, his words hit Goldie like a strike to the heart. Known for his fiery political stances and outspoken activism, Penn mocked what he called lightweight Hollywood do-gooders, who dabble in causes without understanding the complexities. He didn't mention Goldie by name, but when he referred to bubbly blondes who think funding a few schools makes them experts, the implication was unmistakable. For Goldie, the attack wasn't just personal, it was erasure. Years of effort, countless hours of study, and an unshakable commitment to children's well-being were reduced to a dismissive stereotype. Friends and colleagues recalled her fury, not for herself, but for the work. She was angry for the kids she was fighting for. To have it dismissed as shallow cut to the core. What made the insult sting even more was the double standard. While Penn's activism was celebrated as serious and radical, Goldie's was belittled as frivolous, simply because she smiled while she worked. In truth, her kindness was deliberate. She believed joy was as powerful as anger in creating change. Yet in a world that equated seriousness with cynicism, her approach was often underestimated. Goldie never confronted Penn directly. Instead, she made her feelings known quietly, but firmly. When Kurt Russell was offered a role in a Penn-directed film, they declined, When her production company acquired rights to a book Penn had wanted to adapt, she chose another director. It was her way of drawing a line without speaking a word. In interviews afterward, she became even more outspoken about the Foundation's scientific basis, often repeating a phrase that seemed aimed at Penn himself. "Kindness is not weakness. Some people mistake anger for depth. I know which creates more change." The rift never healed. At industry events, they kept their distance, a silent acknowledgement that some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. For Goldie, this wasn't about ego. It was about respect. And when Penn mocked her life's work, he crossed a line that could never be undone. By the mid-1990s, Goldie Hawn had nothing left to prove. She was an Oscar winner, a box office star, and a successful producer in an industry where women rarely held creative power. She had built a career that balanced comedy, drama, and independence. So when talks began about her starring opposite Tommy Lee Jones in a sharp political satire, she approached the project with optimism. With two seasoned actors at the helm, she expected mutual respect and collaboration. What she encountered instead was arrogance disguised as seriousness. At the very first table read, Jones repeatedly interrupted her, questioning her interpretations and offering unsolicited corrections. To witnesses, it didn't feel like collaboration at all. It felt like condescension. Goldie had spent decades perfecting her craft, proving that comedy required precision, timing, and intelligence. Yet Jones treated her not as an equal, but as if she were still the laughing girl of decades past. The tension deepened during a discussion of a pivotal debate scene between their characters. Goldie suggested a subtle shift in the dialogue, one that the writers loved, as it gave her character more presence. Jones immediately shut it down with a cold remark. "Maybe on Laugh-In you could improvise, but this is serious work." The words cut straight to an old wound. For years, Goldie had fought against being dismissed as lightweight, proving again and again that her comedy came from intelligence and artistry. Yet even after decades of success, here she was, still being diminished, still being told she didn't belong in serious storytelling. Goldie didn't argue. She didn't try to win him over. Instead, she calmly closed her script and said, "I think I've misunderstood the collaborative nature of this project." By the next morning, she had withdrawn completely. The film collapsed without her, and she and Jones never worked together again. Later, when asked in an interview about difficult actors, Goldie didn't mention his name. Instead, she gave a pointed but timeless response. "Some actors don't just act tough. They're impossible to be around. Life's too short for that kind of energy." For Goldie, Tommy Lee Jones was the final confirmation of a truth she had long known. No matter how far a woman rose in Hollywood, there would always be men who tried to pull her back down. But she had learned something vital. She didn't have to stay in their shadow. She had the power to walk away. Looking back, the names form a daunting list. Chevy Chase, Warren Beatty, Bruce Willis, Bill Murray, Sean Penn, Tommy Lee Jones. Different men, different decades, different projects. Yet together they reveal a pattern as old as Hollywood itself. A pattern of ego, cruelty, and the dismissal of women's brilliance. For Goldie Hawn, each encounter was unique in its sting. Chase mocked her talent. Beatty turned intimacy into betrayal. Willis diminished her creative vision. Murray reduced her to her body. Penn belittled her life's work. Jones treated her as though she hadn't earned her place. Different wounds, but the same message. No matter how hard she worked, how high she climbed, or how much she proved herself, there were always men who saw her success as a threat and her light as something to dim. It wasn't only Goldie. Hollywood has long been a place where women were expected to smile through insults, to accept less pay, less respect, and fewer opportunities. Many of her peers endured the same dismissals, the same quiet cruelties, but without Goldie's resilience, they disappeared from the spotlight altogether. Goldie's story, then, is not just about her own scars. It is about the broader culture of an industry that demanded women be charming but not ambitious, funny but not intelligent, beautiful but not aging. She lived through every contradiction and paid the price for challenging them. And yet, through it all, she refused to surrender her dignity. She never begged for approval, never chased after those who wronged her. Instead, she built her own path, producing her own films, creating her own opportunities, and later dedicating herself to causes that mattered beyond Hollywood's glitz. The pattern of disrespect was real, but so was the pattern of resistance. Each insult became a lesson, each betrayal a reason to stand taller. If the men she worked with tried to diminish her, Goldie's quiet defiance ensured that she never diminished herself. Goldie Hawn's greatest weapon was never anger. It was where others might have lashed out, named names, or waged public battles. She chose a quieter form of resistance. She knew Hollywood thrived on drama, but she also knew that dignity could be louder than scandal if she held her ground long enough. When Chevy Chase mocked her, she didn't retaliate with insults. She simply vowed never to work with him again. When Warren Beatty humiliated her, she didn't chase revenge. She built her own company and created films that outlasted his betrayal. When Bruce Willis dismissed her vision, she walked away from the project entirely, even at financial cost, because her principles mattered more than credit. Bill Murray's cruelty could have broken her spirit, but she turned her back instead, refusing to give him another chance to wound her. Sean Penn questioned her activism, so she doubled down on the science behind her foundation, proving her seriousness with results, not rhetoric. And when Tommy Lee Jones treated her like an amateur, she left the film rather than remain in a room where respect was absent. This was Goldie's quiet defiance. She did not allow bitterness to define her, but she never allowed cruelty to go unchecked. She answered insults not with outrage, but with choices, withdrawing her time, her energy, and her talent from those who didn't deserve them. Her resilience was not passive, it was deliberate. Every time she walked away, she reaffirmed her own worth. Every time she smiled in public, she showed that her spirit was stronger than the attempts to diminish. And every time she built something new, be it a film, a company, or a foundation, she proved that she was more than the roles others tried to confine her to. Goldie never needed to win a battle of words, because she won the battle of legacy. The men who disrespected her became footnotes in stories of arrogance, while she endured as a symbol of light, strength, and perseverance. Goldie Hawn's life has always been framed by laughter. From her earliest days on Laugh-In, to her iconic performances in films like Private Benjamin and Overboard, she gave the world joy. She made people believe in love, in humor, and in lightheartedness. That gift alone would have been enough to secure her place in Hollywood history. But Goldie's true legacy reaches far beyond the screen. It lies in the battles she fought quietly, the dignity she preserved when others tried to strip it away, and the courage she showed in walking away when respect was no longer offered. Each scar she carries tells a story, not just of cruelty or betrayal, but of resilience, strength, and the refusal to let bitterness consume her. She stood up to arrogance without shouting. She turned humiliation into determination. She responded to dismissal by creating her own opportunity. And when her activism was mocked, she kept building, kept smiling, and kept proving that kindness can be as powerful a force for change as anger. At 79, Goldie no longer hides behind diplomacy. She speaks openly of the men who wounded her: Chase, Beatty, Willis, Murray, Penn, and Jones. Not to reopen old wounds, but to show the truth of what it means to be a woman in Hollywood. Her story is a reminder that the world behind the glamour is often harsh, but also that survival is possible without sacrificing grace. Her laughter is still her signature, but it is no longer the whole story. Behind it lives resilience, dignity, and a courage forged through hardship. Goldie Hawn's legacy is not simply that she made us laugh. It is that she endured, she stood tall, and she proved that true brilliance cannot be dimmed by cruelty. For decades, audiences loved her for her smile. Now we honor her for her strength.